So Amy Leduc is my private detective. She's half French, half American. She's taller and thinner than I am, and she lives on the Ile Saint-Louis because that's where I would like to live. She's inherited a private detective agency from her father and has run it, and when he was murdered in this mysterious explosion, she decided to take it over and turn to computer security. So she doesn't want to do criminal, but she is trained.
So is it a contemporary series? Or?
Well, sort of. We're in the 1990s. The first book is 1993. Now in the new book, we're in July 1999. But with the caveat that there's no Facebook, there's no Twitter. Google was on the horizon. You could smoke in the cafes. Jacques Chirac was president, doing all the things he was later almost indicted for. And they were paying in francs, not euros. It's a bit of a pastime, but you know, they have cell phones, they can hack computers, so it's kind of a near past.
Why did you set it in the near past as opposed to contemporary?
Well, I started writing in 1993. I had a story I wanted to tell about my friend's mother, a hidden Jewish girl, in the Marais during the wartime, that German occupation. But I wanted to also, I was going to France a lot in the 90s. I wanted to talk about contemporary France, you know, the women I knew, my friends. And so I was thinking how to put that together. And my dad was a mystery reader, and he was like, you could frame it in a mystery, and you could talk about the past that impacted the present day, which was the 90s. So I wrote it. It wasn't published till 1999. And it wasn't so, you know, so very old then. And my editor said, well, where is Amy Leduc going after this story? And I said, what? And she said, yeah, you know, her dog and the man she met, and you are writing a series, aren't you? And I lied and said, of course I am.
Right.
So that got me into my life of crime. I just moved her incrementally, you know, every few months, every season. So now, 17 books later, we're in July 1999.
I want to talk about the book, but tell me about the arrondissement. And you've written 17 books, and Paris has 20 arrondissements. What are arrondissements for people who don't know?
Sure. They're districts of Paris, sections. I mean, I live in San Francisco, so I live in Noe Valley, but there's the Mission, there's downtown, you have the Loop and all these. So the first arrondissement in Paris started out on the Ile de la Cité with Notre Dame, and then it expanded, and each king built a wall, and the next king knocked it down, and Paris became what we know with the 20 arrondissements, 20 districts on left and right bank. And each one has because they were villages at one time, and they specialized, like, you know, whether in timber or furniture making or the leather business, they had a distinct flavor. And that still remains, even though Paris, you can always find a cafe and, you know, everywhere and sit outside and have wine. But it's really, there's a special flavor, and I like to talk about that.
You deal with political issues in almost all your books. Why is that?
Everything is politics. Art is politics. That's what French people told me. It's all politics. And I'm like, okay, even art, yes. And I think it's fascinating because of the time that I write in the 90s. This was happening. You know, the Dayton Accord had happened a few years before, but things were still happening. So I think to paint a real, true reflection of the 90s, I need to write about what was in the front page, you know, what people were talking about, who was running for this, what scandal was happening, what demonstration, and what strike, because there's always a strike in Paris, right? And that means something to people, you know, I mean, whether the hospital workers are striking, you know, it's always in the newspaper. And I want to reflect what was happening. So if you were on the street in Amy Leduc's high heels and you were looking around, you would feel that, you would see that in the newsstand, you would hear people talking about it.
So you are known for your descriptions of Paris that are really sensory. You know, the taste, the smell, as well as sight and sound. And I want to know, how do you do that? And how can I get some?
Come with me on my next research trip.
You do that so well.
Thank you, thank you. Well, I think, as I was saying before, that if you're going to, you know, I'm writing a book set in this part of Paris, it needs to reflect that part of Paris. And I want you to be on the street, in Amy's heels, seeing, smelling, tasting, touching what she is. Because that's my job, to take you to Paris at this time, and, you know, during this season, And I really work on the sensory details. But I love that in Paris. I mean, it smells different. There's butter wafting from the boulangerie. There's high heels clicking over the we're on the pavement and the cobblestones. You know, there's perfume, there's cigarette smoke, there's, you know, it's a very smelly city, at least then. But there's also the light. I often go to a place in the book, and I'll go there the same place, different times of day. Because I want to know in the morning when people are getting up and taking the children.
You mean when you're doing your research?
When I'm doing my research.
Yeah.
I'll go there when they're taking the kids to school, when people are going to the metro to work. Then I'll go there maybe later at lunchtime. Then I'll go late in the afternoon. Kids are coming home from school. Who's coming home for the aperitif hour in the cafe later on? I want to see how the light hits, what it looks like, the pulse of that area. And that's what I want to bring alive.
And we're going to be following the steps of our main character, Amy Leduc, on the scooter.
On the scooter.
And where are we right now?
We're at Amy Leduc's house on Ile Saint-Louis, on the Quai d'Anjou.
Shall we go in?
Yeah, let's go. Come on. So we're on the route that Amy takes every day to go to work. Yeah, this is the way she goes, and you can see what it's like. You get to cross the Seine. You know, she doesn't care about the police, right? You know, we were almost stopped, but she would just whiz by them and get away with it. She often drives on the pavement too if it's after midnight, you know, if there's nobody around.
So what do you think of the ride so far?
I love it. I think it's great. I like how you weave in and out of the buses and the taxis.
Is that what Amy does?
Yeah, totally.
800-year-old city wall. There it is. We made it.
We made it, and we're going to be late for work, Oliver, you know.
So this is where Amy, the famed detective agency where she works.
She does, and we just came on her route from Ile Saint-Louis where she lives, with you driving and weaving through traffic to get to her office. So that's what she does, basically, every day.
So shall we get to work?
Okay. And I said to my friend who lives there, how can I write about this place? She goes, you go down in the Boulevard de Belleville on market day, you go sit at outdoor cafe, you drink mint tea, and you write down everything you see that goes by. And I did just that. And I remember I wrote it in my notebook, and it's actually in Murder in Belleville, it's actually there, the paragraph, word for word, as I wrote it in my notebook. That's the only time nothing has ever been edited, but it's like, that literally came from what I saw on that street in my notebook, because that's the way it was, you know, that's what I was seeing. And in Paris, I take the flics out to lunch, and I buy them wine, and then I buy them more wine, and they talk, and yeah. I can't always take notes, you know, because then it interrupts the flow, but I'll tape record them, or I'll just remember and write it down later. But I meet cops, I take...
Now, you're well known by the police in Paris now, but you don't have an ankle bracelet on.
No, I don't. Actually, every time I go, I get to meet new people. I met a forensic doctor who testifies in court this last time. He invited me for dinner with a bunch of cops, which was totally cool. This was a big deal.
Yeah.
I was pretty amazed.
Yeah.
You know, and they were like, well, how can we help you? You know, and I'm like, you're so helpful. Why? And he goes, we want you to get it right. You know.
How do you normally write? Do you work on a computer? Do you work on yellow pads?
I have yellow pads, yes.
Yeah.
I have a computer, my
yellow pads.
Yellow pads. I make, I don't really want that, but I make butcher paper kind of.
Yeah.
When I get to I have to find a place in Paris that I feel is important, that I want to write about, that I'll spend a year writing about. An area maybe I don't know well, but that I want to learn about. I feel that I could, you know, it intrigues me. Then what kind of crime Amy would be investigating. And then once I have the place, then I start just working on why she would be involved, what crime would be organic to this area, what she would be, you know, why she would be called or be involved. And then I start from there, and I try to get to a really rough draft about page 100.
Uh-huh.
And then if I feel I have a story, then I start to timeline it out. I put some paper on the wall and I go, okay, Monday.
But after you've gotten to roughly 100 pages. Interesting. That's neat.
And I have physical objects, things
Yeah.
from the flea market, you know, people would have or touch, or old, you know, these are all over, you know, the metro ticket. I mean, you know, just constant things that are in your pocket. And, you know, I digital record things when I'm sitting in the cafe or on the street, just so I get that sound and I'm back there and I remember being in that cafe or walking down that street. And I mean, because I can't write everything down, you know.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, that's right, it was that day when the clouds were like this and these men were unloading that and the dog came barking, and you know what I mean? For me, that brings takes me to that street in Paris, and I'm there because I have to, my job is to
Yeah.
take you with my detective to that street and feel that and smell it and taste it and textures, you know.
Love it.
We don't have enough texture in books.
Yeah.
It's a tricky one to get down too.
So there you are, unfortunately, on this plane. It's going down, it's going to crash. You're going to be the only survivor on a desert island, and you're only allowed to take the collected works of some writer with you. Who would that writer be?
Oscar Wilde.
Ah, nice.
I'd cry, I'd laugh, I'd do many things.
Yeah, yeah, that's cool.